Well, hello there, everyone,
Uh,
and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast.
And on this week's second Record Club, we are going to be talking about my recommended album. We are going to be talking about the incomparable In Absentia by Porcupine Tree, the long-awaited follow-up. We talked about Deadwing earlier this year. We talked about Deadwing and we talked about Hand Cannot Erase, two projects that are very, very important in the canon of one Mr. Steven Wilson, the frontman of Porcupine Tree. He also had an album that came out this year that we reviewed, but just go watch the Deadwing video.
we'll put it in the description as well if you want to go and check it out. We'll make sure to put a
Yes.
link in the description.
If you haven't seen it, it's a very worthwhile video because those are two very dense albums that have a lot to them that I think we cracked open very, very well, especially with Deadwing. That's sort of a really more mysterious sort of artifact. But when it comes to Porcupine Tree, since we covered them on an episode, and they're my favorite band, as I've said many times, I'm sure longtime listeners know. But since we can't do like a B-sides on them proper, and because they just have a lot of albums in general, and I mean, I did make my tier list to sort of obfuscate that, but the discussion though is what I really want from some of these albums, and it was really difficult picking the next one that I wanted to go with because there's tons of great ones, sure, but which ones are the most interesting to really pull apart? And ultimately I came down on In Absentia because In Absentia is at least considered by many to be the Porcupine Tree album. It is basically like most commonly considered to be the best. It is usually the highest rated. It got an insane amount of acclaim at the time that it came out, and I'll elaborate a little bit more as to its release a little bit later. But this is an album that is sort of considered the, like, not the arrival, just because the band had obviously been making music for like 12 fucking years, but this is sort of the moment after one of their records was particularly like good, successful, and fully formed, where they kind of cemented what was different about them. Because if you've heard me talk about them, or you've heard me talk about them in my tier list video, is that their 90s run of albums is very good. There's a lot of great quality shit in there that are absolute essentials that you have to hear, but none of them feel fully and wholly of maybe the mind of Steven Wilson. And I think that pivoted on Lightbulb Sun and Stupid Dream. We kind of have like we see something different on the horizon. And that something different was In Absentia. It was the second Porcupine Tree album I ever heard. And it was the one that got me into the band. And I figured that was in and of itself is enough for like an avenue of discussion, just because I know that Tyler has heard it before, and I know that Morgan has heard it before. I think Morgan and I probably have the longest histories with it. Saoirse didn't really have much history with it, and I think August had tampered around with it before, maybe a little bit after he heard Fear of a Blank Planet. So I thought it would be a good choice for this. And just to set the stage a little bit here, what was going on at the time is that In Absentia came out in 2002 after Lightbulb Sun in 2000. So there was a 2-year sort of break period between the albums. And that's sort of when, like, if you measure the amount of times between albums, that 2-year gap usually yields something that's like a really big step forward for the band rather than like a year. And what was going on is that, curiously, the record we just talked about, the Broken Social Scene record, that album was sort of, we kind of mentioned a couple of times, that was in the wake of 9/11, and you can kind of feel that in the record. But here it's a little bit more direct, because in the process of making the album, 9/11 happened, and it directly inspired one particular song that Steven Wilson wrote, but also just kind of the mood and energy of In Absentia. And In Absentia is a curious album because while many can argue that it is definitely like just, it is a collection of great songs by this band, put together, and maybe it has like a little bit of an overarching theme, but it's sort of it's emblematic for the band, because what happened was Stupid Dream and Lightbulb Sun were kind of breakout records. They weren't like hugely successful by any means, but for a prog rock band in the 90s, they were doing well. They were on an upward incline. And what happened is that Steven Wilson was getting interested in more diverse musical palettes and genres. He discovered bands like Opeth, where he saw the real innovation in rock music happening for him was in the metal scene. So it wasn't exactly a stranger to it, but he wanted to incorporate some of these things on the new album. He wanted to really push through, but he was met with a bit of a fork in the proverbial road, so to speak, of like he was getting signed on to, I think, a new label,
Lava
or
Records,
like somebody else was, yeah. And basically, because they were on that upward trajectory, he was being incentivized by other people to be like, hey, this direction that you've been going in, this is going to get you somewhere. This is going to get you radio play. Like this kind of stuff, if you infuse it correctly and you sort of have these sort of like the art rocky or Britpop kind of stuff, you could break through. And Steven knew that and he wanted that, but he also wanted to pursue the stranger and darker and heavier sounds that were more inclined to him now, because he felt that he had explored everything else before him as well as he possibly could have. And as a result, he ended up choosing the way of what beckoned him musically. It also came from the fact that naturally, Gavin Harrison, who would go to be a drummer for King Crimson's live stuff, which is commonly considered some of their best like work and performance work. Gavin Harrison, Steven Wilson, they met, they were more involved in the creative process. And as a result, In Absentia is maybe the biggest departure in sound since the first two albums. So we have a completely new thing going on here. This is the sound that would lead to an album like Deadwing. This is the darker, heavier, edgier stuff. But as a result, it did kind of end up putting the band into that niche cult classic status of being beloved, but they never really broke through in the way they would do to need success.
Yeah.
So then we are here at In Absentia.
Something Steven said as well, like has talked about a lot throughout his career, because one thing that people who I think are a bit more ignorant perhaps think of when they think of Porcupine Tree is they think of kind of like this traditionalist approach to prog rock, where it's very sort of like backwards looking and very sort of like, you know, standard and cliche or whatever. But Steven's always been very vocal about wanting to move beyond those kinds of perceptions, wanting to be a sort of band that escaped that, especially because at the time when they were sort of touring records like Lightbulb Sun, their audience, their core audience as well, were people who were sort of very kind of like, you know, enamored with sort of classic prog and sort of like older people. And they wanted to sort of, I guess, find some more vitality and diversify their audience as well. They did a tour for In Absentia, I think, where they opened for Yes, and Steven described it as an incredibly unpleasant experience, because all of the people in the audience were there for Yes to hear the classics, and Porcupine Tree were playing this increasingly heavy prog metal music that just had no appeal in that context. And so part of it was the desire to move beyond the template, move beyond the scene that they had been lumped into. And like you said, the increasing vitality of the metal scene, as far as Steven was concerned, I think a big part of that as well is the fact that he actually even produced Opeth's Blackwater Park the year before this record came out. So he not only was seeing what was going on over there, he was like being directly involved in that scene. And that, you know, it was inevitable that that would filter back into the music he was making. But what's so stark and surprising about In Absentia is just how dramatic it sounds in terms of that shift that's made. And a huge part of it, as you say, is the addition of Gavin Harrison, who I think initially the band's previous drummer, Chris Maitland, I'm not sure the exact reason he left. It might have been over creative differences or just the label change or something like that. It wasn't working out.
So it was like a mixture of creative differences and a sort of personal, just rubbing each other the wrong way.
Yeah, there were some tensions.
Him and Wilson specifically.
Yeah, and so there was
it is worth noting that they repaired that relationship later and collabed again after the fact on something else.
Yeah, absolutely. But you're right. And so there was this void that was there, in the lead up to In Absentia, where the bands they had the songs basically, and most of the sort of demos were recorded and they had an idea of the shape of the record. But bringing Gavin in, who initially I think was just a hired hand sort of thing, but eventually joined the band properly and would obviously be a defining aspect of their subsequent records, as we've talked about. But his addition gave an additional weight to the compositions, and that's immediately apparent from the moment you put the record on. I'm sure we'll get into it, but so in many ways, this is a real sort of paradigm shift for Porcupine Tree. It's really the fulcrum point of their career, I think, where like as Jake has kind of said, there's this hugely noticeable shift in terms of sound, in terms of approach, and also in terms of some of the ideas that Stephen's getting at. It's funny to think, that Stephen wanted success as much as he did, because he genuinely did. But it's funny to think about that and then listen to a record like In Absentia, which is so relentlessly unfriendly in a lot of ways, especially in terms of some of the lyrical subject matter across a lot of these songs. It feels almost like he's trying to achieve this sort of success while at the same time making it clear that he wants to distance himself from a particular kind of association with success, or a particular kind of pop music machine. And that, of course, is reflected very aggressively in a song like The Sound of Music, for instance, where he is really going against that sort of template, or that sort of idea of radio friendly unit shifters, of bands that are just there to, appease the masses, or the pop music machine, in the way that it swallows up bands and devalues music and all that sort of thing. That is very pointed on a song like that. So yeah, it's interesting to me when I listen to this, the dichotomy between Stephen's desire for success, Stephen's desire to streamline the band and increase their appeal to more people, and as well Stephen's desire to be this sort of subversive thing at the same time.
You're just really tapping into something I found very interesting about the record, which is basically that it sounds so much like, well, for me, where a lot of the rock metal crossover scene would go for the rest of the decade, in a way that it sort of hasn't really gone away. Like, you talk about that 90s sound, and to me, that sound, whilst I love it, is so representative of that decade. But what the direction Stephen is going in here, it's like we've talked about a lot of where sort of post-grunge was in the 2000s and the late 90s and places like that. And I feel like after this record, that's the direction that scene really went in a way. Stephen Wilson being
I think that's important to point out, in the sense of, like, Tyler expressed this, and Morgan also did when we talked about Deadwing, is that Stephen, at least amongst people who are a lot less charitable to him, is kind of known to be like this glorified tribute artist, which we've already spoken as to how we all obviously disagree with that. But I think that Saoirse's point here of this being like, it's not exactly like it was the shape of rock to come, but it's like, it's definitely noticeable in these avenues of music that, like, pretty much everything that was, even glimpsed something that looked like Porcupine Tree, you can find it in there. And that's, I think, the best argument for it being, like, genuinely progressive. It's like Tyler said, is that when he went and toured with Yes, is that audiences who liked traditional prog rock, the prog rock that everyone thinks that Steven Wilson only makes, they didn't like Porcupine Tree. They didn't like the thing that he was trying to give them. And that was the direction he was really pushing for. And it's also found, I think, that Tyler talked about the sort of struggle that he had internally of trying to choose between success and artistry, and talking about, like, he's not new to criticizing the music industry. He did that on things like Lightbulb Sun, but also in the subject material being way more unfriendly here. I think we talked about, like, Deadwing and its narrative, and how that is an album mired in anger and tragedy. And to be quite honest with you, the more I've listened to In Absentia, the more I find this to be a slightly darker album, because there's some sort of peace that I feel is achieved on Deadwing. There's a progression there, whereas In Absentia is a lot of very vague, open-ended questions that very much leave you in a state of almost like disrepair. There's like just like Steven Wilson has gone on to say that, like, there's a fascination he has with the void in people, which is what the In Absentia thing means. And as a result, he talks about things like serial killers, things like child abuse, things like just like loneliness, as it were, in relation specifically to the alienation of the self. And it's just painted all over here. We talked about him as being this dude who kind of like, Steven's been working with music since he was like literally a teenage boy, 16 years old, doing engineering work. He understands the world through sound. So when you have songs like The Sound of Music, the things that he's singing about, it's not just her industry bad, it's that like music is a thing that he cares so deeply about, and it's so troubling him that he just has to vocalize the fact that it's just like, this is bad, and I need to like say something about this, because this is this thing that I love and it's being devalued. And I feel like that sort of that potential disconnect that August kind of touched on with whenever we cover Porcupine Tree on here, is that Steven kind of has a tendency to be like, by other people, he could come across as being like, oh, technology bad, phone bad, society bad.
Old man yells at cloud.
Yeah, but he's being emotionally honest. And I think that honesty is a lot more earnest here, which is why you never really hear that brought up in this album. But like, to kind of talk less about like generally speaking, Tyler said from the moment this album starts, you can sort of feel Gavin Harrison's and just the overall new direction come in immediately. And that is the most apt way to describe Blackest Eyes, which, I mean, look, if you know what Porcupine Tree is, this is a song that is so fucking ubiquitous, you could almost even call it overrated. But the thing is that I've listened to Blackest Eyes north of 1,000 times that I've been here on this green earth, and goddamn, it never, ever, ever slaps any less. The drums on Blackest Eyes, it is the loudest I have, like, it sounds like someone is literally like if you showed me a picture of Gavin Harrison in the studio doing the drumming on this song, I feel like it would look like him taking one drum, taking two drumsticks and going trying to beat it rhythmically.
It sounds like Gavin and Steven made the conscious decision to have the snares sound like you are being punched by Muhammad Ali. Like, it is one of the most intense snare sounds I've ever heard in my life. It is just ballistic.
We've talked about the sound of it, which is immense and just one of the greatest drum sounds ever. But the playing on the song, what?
The riff.
There's one drum fill that is right at the end of the riff where it goes. It leads you into the next repetition of the riff, and it's just it grabs you by the lungs. And it's not in the mixing, it's just in the playing. It's mixing syncopation with hitting the beats in ways that's always unexpected, and it shoves you along. But I want to touch on the guitar playing and the composition here for a moment, because it was immediately like something that I think is true of a lot of the record. Immediately, like some of the groovest stuff, some of the deepest grooves that I've ever heard from Porcupine Tree or Steven Wilson. And this is a sound that they wear like they were born, like they've been doing it for decades, right? It's just absolutely intoxicating. And it sounds like it was made at the peak of like the mid 2000s rock scene, right? Where people had been doing music in that vein for like 5-6 years and we'd gotten to a point where we knew what it was. No, this is right out the gate, kick down the door. This is what we're doing now. Live with it.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, this is, while there may have been shades of the influence in certain points of earlier Porcupine Tree records, this is their first record as a fully fledged progressive metal band. And with that shift comes the increased technicality of the playing, which I think is really one of the defining aspect of the instrumentation the mood of it is so consistently really dark and ugly and just dank, for lack of a better word, as well, which also ties it into that metal aesthetic world more directly too. But Yeah, I mean, just generally the increased focus on groove that you say is so present. I mean, I think about the rolling bass lines that open Strip the Soul and Point Three, for instance, as well. Just that sense of the rhythmic center of these songs being so present. Again, another integral part of the prog
Oh, and
metal
Edwin.
influence. Yes,
Oh,
absolutely. And I want
God.
to say, like, as well, this is the first Porcupine Tree record I ever heard. The reason why I heard it, because I actually heard it before I became friends with any of you guys. The reason why I heard it is that it was recommended to me by someone I want to shout out because I know they occasionally do watch our show and we haven't shouted them out before. Twitter user Generic Orange Soda, shout out. This is their favorite album of all time. And I remember them saying it once on Twitter, and
Based.
that just stuck in my head because I'd never really heard of Porcupine Tree. And so I looked up this record. I saw that it was pretty well rated, so I threw it on. And then, yeah, Blackest Eyes was my first exposure to this band. And so, yeah, that was something to behold. And I think it really can't be understated just how definitively and powerfully this new rhythmically charged iteration of Porcupine Tree really break the door down with that. And I think it's meaningful as well that that song is doubled with Trains.
I was gonna say it just like it almost like wrong foots you in the way that it's set up.
Yeah.
And like it took me forever when I was much younger listening to this album to understand why Blackest Eyes was followed by Trains, because I was like, I don't know, this doesn't quite make like sonic sense to me. And like I was expecting more shit that sounded like Tool and Wet This Hard. And then there's this sad ass prog ballad. And I don't understand. And now I'm just like, this is Steven Wilson is a genius. This is the greatest bit of sequencing ever.
I think part of that, the reason unlocking why that worked, I mean, beyond just like the feeling that it worked, but unlocking why it works, I think really helped me to appreciate this album because you have a lot of songs on this record that are about these really just tortured, dark people, and sometimes Steven even like takes it like to the real extreme in terms of the things he's suggesting that are happening. But essentially, these are songs about broken people, and so Blackest Eyes gives you that like in the most ugly way with those lyrics that suggest these awful, violent acts that are being committed and the just total rot that's happening inside the person's brain. And then Trains comes in, and it's a song about a different kind of brokenness. Like it's a song about, nostalgia and wistfully looking back and realizing that the point you're at now at your life will never be as pure and beautiful and content as that time the times when you were a child laying in your bed and hearing trains going by outside. Like it's just this beautiful detail. And these two songs together complement each other, and they paint these two various pictures of how, I guess, that being empty and growing up empty and having something missing makes you into this dark broken thing, but also this dark broken thing that has these two kinds of sides to it, this real genuine kind of ugliness that can boil over in extreme cases and become genuinely toxic, and this kind of just more self-contained, tragic, sad, common brokenness. And so what's beautiful about In Absentia as an album is it's a record about being broken, but it's a record about being the various different ways in which people can be broken, the various different ways in which people can exist in a state of brokenness, be aware of that or be not aware of that. And that's kind of a loose sort of theme, but it really lends a lot of the best songs here just a profound impact. And Trains is absolutely a quintessential example. I mean, it's no wonder that this record didn't get the success that they wanted, because it's just, how could you expect, not even arrangements aside, how could you expect songs as just utterly devastating as Trains to gain any traction? And I think maybe there was a part of Steven that knew that, but also knew that he had to make that anyway.
I think that that's like undeniably true, and that's kind of why this is so thoroughly committed to its own identity. And just to back up a tiny bit on Blackest Eyes is that we sort of talked about how like him working with Opeth probably informed this. And I think the Blackest Eyes thing is not only because of how heavy it is, but because Opeth is a band that focuses on like, you know, oscillating between you know, just fiery demonic intensity and serene contemplative beauty. And that's what Blackest Eyes is because the fucking, you know, it comes in with that fucking incredible breakdown, and then immediately it just goes into that really like the verses and the chorus, like that just the way it switches between the two and showcases it. Like I get why Morgan would be like, yeah, this kind of sequencing at first doesn't really work for me, but Blackest Eyes is great. It's because it's a mission statement. It's like, this is everything we can be, and then the rest of the album is fleshing out every single tiny little idea that's showcased to you. And God, trains. I remember when I first told Morgan about this band, and it was through In Absentia, and I just remember a text message that he sent me once, and he's just like, I haven't really been listening to the whole album because I just keep like, I think you even said you didn't even finish the album because you were just like so enamored with how sad Trains was and just really couldn't stop listening to it. And I can't blame you because this is one of the most beautiful songs that he's ever penned. It's so just like that. Even the breakdown in it is soul wrenching. You just get that, like, you know, that acoustic at the beginning, the da-na-na-na-na-na, but then when everything comes in and it's really like, I'm like, oh God, it's
like the decision to after that breakdown when there's a guitar solo, but to keep that solo on the acoustic is like bodies in motion, a mythic text,
a mythic fucking text about.
Beautiful.
I mean, Tyler already touched on Trains being sort of like this nostalgic longing, and I think you could maybe attribute a lot of these songs to being like about different kinds of people and the way they're broken, or even about the same person, but like I don't think it's quite that conceptual. It's really just more bending to the whim of the music and the sort of core idea of emptiness, because like Blackest Eyes is, yeah, no, that's like the most overt song that's about serial killers, like, you know, talking about like having a place for them in their garden shed. And I fucking like the delivery that Steven uses when he's just like when he sort of does the beginning of the line where you're like, it's so erotic when your makeup runs. I'm like, oh my God, please stop.
It's like even in the more beautiful, I guess, moments of that song, he's still kind of souring that, which is great. It's great.
I mean, I just want to touch on like, hey, that acoustic guitar solo, beautiful choice, and it's such a beautiful textural choice, right? And that's just all over the record, is blending that heaviness with beauty through texture. Like, you want to look at the way it transitions into a song, which we will get to, like Heart Attack and a Lay-By, and the way texture works on that song to create a vibe. Pain Every Day. But for me, the thing about the track listing is, like, when I first listened to this album, just because of life, I was very angry, right? And Blackest Eyes helped get some of that out. And then with the beauty of Trains, it's like, I've had a lot of catharsis and now I want to cry. And it just completely plays with your emotions. It plays with them.
Yeah, it's funny, like Blackest Eyes and Trains get a lot of, you know, deserving attention for being this 1-2 punch amazing opener, but it almost feels like they almost dominate a lot of discussion of this album as well, which, you know, I can understand. They're really like these amazing, perfectly formed songs, but Blackest Eyes isn't my favorite, like, proper heavy song on this record, and Trains isn't my favorite ballad either, which is hilarious to say.
Nope.
But yeah, I think
they're two of the best of their kind.
And part of that, admittedly, is that we're just, the four of us are so fucking Wilson pilled at this point that we're like digging as far into this stuff as is possible.
But yeah, I want to touch on my favorite sort of, like, it's hard to pick. I don't even like the idea of picking favorites, but I just want to particularly shout out a song that over the time I've spent with this album has come to be like a real standout to me. And that's the track Gravity Eyelids, which I think is like a more expansive version of Blackest Eyes, almost, because lyrically it's very similar. It's these very, very incredibly dark, just lyrics that suggest this awful, unspeakable violence that's happening, or just this like dressing up of a corpse basically that's happening. And it's horrendous, but it's also this incredibly dreamy and beautiful until it's not, until it gets fucking heavy, until it goes fucking crazy, and I just lose my mind listening to this fucking song. It's so good.
That song is fucking terrifying.
Oh god, right? It's genuinely, like, we talk about this record feeling superior point. This song is the apotheosis of that for me, because I'm lulled into this false sense of security. The lyrics are like, Wilson is singing in such a pretty way that almost like, until I sit down with the lyrics sheet, I don't realize he's talking about touching your oil skin, slipping hands past your waist.
And like once you realize that you can never go back. You just hear those first notes.
Winding me up tease, get inside my head and make it show. Fucking let the salt flow, feel my coil unwind.
Yeah.
No, not your coil.
There's another one.
But the thing that I think makes a song great about its structure is it's like it leads you down like a garden path. It's like you're a frog when the water's getting hotter and you don't leap out before you're boiling.
And then there's just a point when that real just doomy metal riff comes in.
So you just don't you slowly like are led, and I'm singing about death, but isn't it so pretty? Isn't it so? And then it's getting more and more threatening. Isn't it pretty? And then it just gets like there's a white noise that gets louder and louder, and you're trapped.
Yeah, it's sick as fuck. And then the way it fucking goes into fucking Wedding Nails as well, which is just
hard as shit.
Those two, I always have those two together in my head, even though they're like separate pieces. They always just kind of flow together and
we
feel
haven't
like
even
one
gone
thing.
to my favorite punch on this record yet.
We will get to every single song, don't worry. One thing I wanted to shout out that I noticed as well is just as an aside is the some of the lyrical continuity between a song like Gravity Eyelids and a song like Drown With Me off of the Futile EP, which was four additional songs that were recorded at the same time as this record, and specifically because both songs make reference to coils being unwound and these ideas of like suggesting like dead bodies and these kind of awful scenarios of some kind of unseen, unspeakable violence that the songs get into. Anyway, total aside, but that whole
it's important you mentioned that though.
Yeah, that whole sensibility, and these in these kind of specific sort of forms of imagery and suggestibility in terms of like really getting you inside the mind of someone who's sort of fundamentally poisoned is a big part of what makes this record so effective, and also a big part of why this record, what this record is about, these songs being infused with this progressive metal direction is so powerful, and is part of the reason why this record is so great. Because if you had these songs universally performed with a musical template of a record like Lightbulb Sun, then they wouldn't have the same sort of impact that the songs on this record have. Like, those two records have very distinct identities that that means that they have they're great and strong in their very own distinct ways, while still sounding like the same band more or less. But it feels like the heaviness that they adopt here is not solely for the purpose of accentuating what the songs are about, but it feels like so important to getting across the atmosphere of those songs.
I also want to backpedal just a tiny itty bitty bit, because Tyler, you said something like that, that we've obviously gushed about Trains and Blackest Eyes, and they tend to just dominate the discussion, so it kind of distracts from how good all the other songs are, even though obviously we love those fucking songs, like top tier Porcupine Tree without question. That said, I have a particular fucking fondness for Lips of Ashes, because that song, like, immediately, like, if you thought the 1-2 punch of Blackest Eyes and Trains being disoriented, and then you go into Lips of Ashes, which is just pure otherworldly ephemera infused beauty. You said like there's like a harp, and it sounds like it is being played at the bottom of a chasm, and you're hearing it like the sound waves burst off and like into you, and then it just comes in with the gentle like lips of ashes, and you're like, whoa. And it's like
I
this
feel like
album
it's-
has everything.
I feel like it's a siren song.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm glad you brought it up. When I listened to this, I've listened to this record a few times with the flax that you sent, the fucking 24-bit flax of the remaster specifically. And listening to it this week, the first time I listened to it, because I always loved Lips of Ashes, I always thought it was a really beautiful song. But listening to it, I fully understood its place in the album, and I was just like fully enamored with it completely for the first time. Listening to that remaster and hearing it come in with the fucking headphones, and it's just a perfect piece of music. I completely agree. It's more subtle. It's a real necessary come down, I think, from the just emotional and physical weight of those first two songs. But at the same time as well, it's not like it's also again a subversion too, because it's a very, very dark song lyrically, and even if it's like only a few words in it, it's just great. The flow and structure of this album is impeccable, and this is a beautiful example of that ebb and flow being necessary to the album's impact. You can't have every song be like Blackest Eyes or Trains. You need to let the record take you on its journey, and yeah, so Lips of Ashes is absolutely essential. I agree.
There's also more of a lyrical through line again. You get the mention of Black Eyes Fading, which like that more or less happens on every song here, and really lends like the lyrical like passages that follow and appear in other songs. That's sort of like a life raft you're thrown, just because it does like, and Porcupine Tree as a whole are so obsessed with having the most multifaceted songs and sound possible that they sort of like keeps giving you these things to hold on to amidst everything being changed. And like you have that sort of like the Lips of Ashes being the come down, and then directly into a slightly more aggressive song with the Sound of Music, but it's like it's a completely different tenor than everything that came before it, like just like instrumentally, mood wise. It's nothing like the three songs that precede it in the slightest.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah, the Sound of Music, to me, it's like the most, again, I've talked about the song already. It's like the core sort of most single sounding song of the record, which is, the irony of it, considering the subject matter. In some ways, it feels a little bit like maybe this song feels a bit sort of pieced into the record a little bit in terms of like its relevance to certain other what the other songs are about. But I don't really mind that too much, because it also it's this kind of like meta moment where you start to get like it's more of a Steven Wilson perspective, and like that kind of takes me out a little bit, but not enough to ruin the run that we're on with this record. So yeah, it's definitely a forgivable little kind of slight irk that I have, but I do really love this song. I just think that the chorus is so great and catchy, and I think that it's very pointed. It's on the nose for sure. Like it's a bit, it's the thing with Steven when he gets on his soapbox in this kind of song is he could always be more subtle, but it's certainly forgivable here. And I do
it's
think
also aimed at the right people, like he's talking about, the music of rebellion makes you want to rage, but it's made by millionaires who are nearly twice your age. And it's just like that particular part holds up well, because he's not talking about like, oh, all these bands sound the same. He's like, no, all these people in boardrooms are controlling how music sounds. And it's like 20 years after this album comes out, you're sitting here like,
yeah,
maybe he made a point, because that's a big fucking problem now.
Yeah. And like the thing is, like it used to bug me, like this song, like especially when he says lines like the music of the future will not entertain, it's only meant to repress and neutralize your brain. I'm like, it's very Tool-esque. But now, like where that used to bug me, it's kind of part of the charm of this sort of song now. I don't really mind it so much anymore.
It's because it's genuine. You can tell he really cares about it.
But yeah, it's a cool song, even if I do think that it is a bit distinct from what's around it in terms of the subject matter. But yeah, so I talked about Gravity Islands and Wedding Nails, which is just a sensational 1-2 punch of pure raw musicality. And I love that the record veers from these kind of direct packaged songs like Sound of Music to these kind of real sort of expansive soundscapes. It really highlights the progressive aspect of the progressive metal. And I'm glad that I'm glad that Porcupine Tree still like clings to that, still like makes the most of that aspect of what they do, because the parts of their albums, and they're consistent on basically every album from like Light Bulb Sun onwards, there'll always consistently be a part where you're just taken on a bit of a trip during this part of the album where you just kind of go down this garden path into this really kind of expansive musical world, and then you eventually will come back to a more sort of familiar structure eventually, but you'll value the journey that you went on. And to me, that's what like musically the diversion of Gravity Islands at Wedding Nails is like.
Definitely.
And then Prodigal almost feels like, it's not like Blackest Eyes, but it almost feels like it's starting the second half of the album in a sort of similar sort of way that
A
Blackest
deeply
Eyes.
underrated song too.
It's a great song. I love, again, this is a moment like with Trains where you just get this real sort of like lyrical hopelessness where it kind of goes away from the really raw, horrific imagery to just capture a real sense of ennui and disconnection and emptiness that, as I've said, the record is kind of holistically about. And one of my favorite little bits of vocal detail on this whole album is just how pained Steven sounds when he sings "Close Your Eyes and Let the Thought Pass." He really hangs on that as if it's like this, this horrific thought of the good times not lasting, and rain crawling down the glass.
The times never seem to last.
And just thinking about that becomes so overwhelming that he has to like, you get a real sense of how painful that is because of the way that Steven sings on the song. It's a very underrated song. I totally agree. Love the blitzing solo in the final minute of the track. And the vocal effects, the vocals that have like layers of effects on them in certain parts of the song as well, that are really kind of like alien sounding. It's a really dope song. I love it.
It's fucking terrific.
Enamored. I'm like enamored with the drum fill in the last like 3 seconds of the song.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Like I've gone back and played it over and over again. Just those couple of seconds.
Yeah, no,
the whole
absolutely.
song is very much gives me open car vibes, like on Dead Wing,
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
that same sort of like the rain keeps falling on the glass.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, like there's so like we talked about how the sense of rhythm is here, but like the melodies on this album are just
Incredible.
like Steven's never been a
And the
slouch
harmonies
vocally,
as
but
well,
like
by the way.
yeah, the vocal melodies and the harmonies are just like when they are beautiful, they are arresting. It's utterly captivating. The second half of the record, I think, is generally kind of, might not be as like well, like it's not as well regarded as like the front half, I think, because it's got all those songs like Blackest Eyes in it. But like this is where the interesting, the wider soundscapes, because you have these albums like Dead Wing and Fear of a Blank Planet, and obviously I love those albums. But their atmospheres and the worlds that they go to, they're very claustrophobic, they're very consuming, they're very almost oppressive, whereas In Absentia is vast. You feel like you're wading in something, and it's such a breath of fresh air from like everything that they've done. Really, that's what sets it apart, really, I think.
What I love about the way Steve Morrison harmonizes in general is that, and he does this with his work in Opeth as well, with Opeth, is that the harmonies don't feel like they often do in songs by other people, where it's like, now this is a harmonized bit. It's just a continuous, seamless continuation of the same voice. It almost feels like one voice is speaking in many different melodies. It's just incredibly seamless, and I think it's incredible.
Yeah,
it's a lot more distinct. I like that observation, just because it points out how like it's like another way of conveying a sense of like brokenness, almost like the harmonies being like different enough but harmonizing together still. It's just like just enough to sound so of at peace with itself and the tone of the rest of the record. That's a great point there.
Yeah, it's one aspect of this kind of tapestry of richness that Porcupine Tree Records is one of the great appeals of listening to any given Porcupine Tree record, and of Stephen's specific production style. I mean, and what elevates, the Opeth records that he produces as well. But yeah, dope shit. I want to come to the defense of the song "The Creator Has a Master Tape." Because I know that's
look, I'm not gonna, it's my least favorite song on the album, but I've really grown on it. So
I know I'm not adding you. I know you like the song, but I want to come to its defense generally, because it is this
please do.
It is this kind of like moment on the record where you have this tense bubbling groove that comes in, and just this jet black darkness as well. Like in terms of like pure, I'm not super enamored with the moments on this record lyrically where it just feels like it's getting like really like excessively dark just for shock value, which I think this record does do at certain points, but it doesn't detract too much from the songs either, because that's not really all that these songs are doing. But this is a song that really, talks about, he raised a proper family so he could tie them to a bed, and so that sort of stuff, and this kind of suggestions of like, torture and stuff in this song. But I just really love how dark it sounds. I love how weird it is too, especially coming after Point 3, which I like Point 3 a lot. I think if I had to pick a least favorite, it might be that song, only because
you boo this man.
I
was gonna say I really want to hear Morgan's Point 3 take, because I know he loves that fucking song.
Yeah, only because it's the song that perhaps gets the closest the album gets to a maybe more classical prog sound that earlier Porcupine Tree records tribute so well. So it's maybe the least kind of original, fresh for this band sounding song on the record, but that's me nitpicking. It's still really, really good. Just saying. But I really like the just genuine weirdness of and also ugliness of the way that Creator as a Master Tape is structured. I love the level of fuzz on that enormous guitar riff when it comes crashing into the song. It sounds really wrong. It sounds like it's infected with the same kind of madness that is possessing the song's protagonist. It's another great moment where you feel like the sound of the song and the subject matter are kind of like really in sync in this beautiful way. And so that riff, when it comes to it, almost derails the whole song because of how like just jagged and loud it is, but it works in this context. It's the most fucked up song on the record, and it gives the album a much needed kick in the teeth at the right spot as well. And it also, I'm not going to get into it now because we'll probably all want to talk about the next song, but it sets up the gut punch that follows it on the record as well. So it's great sequencing. Really wanted to just give a proper shout out to this song, because it does get a little bit underrated generally.
I think that's the thing. When I said earlier that we hadn't got to my favorite 1-2 punch on the record, Creator Has a Master Tape into Heart Attack and a Lay-By is my choice for that.
God, what a based choice.
Yeah, there's no moment on the record that is more kind of jaggedly, starkly shocking than the just disconnect between those two songs. And yet the way they are related and one kind of flows into the other, both musically and in terms of the fact that, Creator as a Master Tape is this manic moment of just absolute frenzied psychosis, and then Heart Attack and a Lay-By is like the aftermath of that, where you're like, holy shit, I'm so fucked up, what have I done? And
so fucked up.
Yeah,
it's like, especially on that like angry drive I had, right? You get completely intertwined with the like, this is so frenetic and dark, and I'm threatening the speed limit, and then you get into sort of Heart Attack and a Lay-By, and it's like, I shouldn't have bought into that frenetic energy. I feel bad now. I want to die.
Yeah,
that's that fucking meme where it's just like, this rules, and then it's just like Heart Attack and a Lay-By. This sucks. Wow.
I really should slow down.
Like that's, it's just like, hey, do you ever just you just want to kill yourself so bad that you just pull over on side of the road and you just wait to die? And it's like,
anyway,
his Creator is somebody call an ambulance, and Heart Attack is, but not from me.
I love the imagery of the Creator's a master tape though, especially as a version of the master plan thing, right?
Yeah.
But where
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
this serial horrible family murderer person does like People Under the Stairs by Wes Craven type beat.
That was the
then-
working title for this album. The serial family murderer person.
And I
think I
just
might have to
love
dock
the
points from
idea
it.
that of this person, whilst doing this, imagining God filming him on videotape. It's so like seedy, and it makes you imply that like God's this horrible, malevolent figure. Because if he's recording this on videotape, it's going in his personal stash. You know,
I almost see it as like the narrator in this song has a god complex and envisions himself in that way.
The great
I mean,
Red
as well.
Because
Dragon.
a lot of these songs about like all these violent acts are about like, you know, people who feel a
Yeah.
certain sense of power and want to exert that in the most kind of devastating ways possible to show that. Which is, I think, at the core of
Right.
a lot of that too.
I almost feel like the best reading of it is like both of those folded onto each other, where it's like he views himself as God, but he views the God that he is as this seedy, malevolent God who hates people.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like the whole, the intertwining between the manic, you know, self grandiosity of the song and the self-loathing that comes in the aftermath of that violent expression in the next song is, you know, they're all part and parcel of the same experience. It's all rooted. All of that hatred is all rooted in a self-loathing. And the story of Heart Attack is like, I mean, you can enjoy this song and appreciate the emotionality without knowing how Steven Wilson wrote it and what was sort of feeding into it. But this idea of someone who is so caught up in their state of mind and that they are just basically so uptight and tense that they're completely unaware that they're having a heart attack, that they're dying, and they just feel this vague discomfort. But they're not able to fully recognize the problem is just very, very moving. And obviously, there's a lot of analogs you could apply to the song emotionally. And it's just, that's why I think it's one of the greatest Porcupine Tree songs. It's probably my favorite song on this record.
The ending lines of "We'll grow old together," just fuck, man, fuck you, fuck you.
Wait for me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
God, it's
die.
a fucking murder.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mm.
I will.
And it's
Commit.
it's a very like quiet and somber song, but a very richly orchestrated one.
Mm.
Oh,
where you
yeah,
have some
instrumentally, it's
very
gorgeous.
Yeah, you have very sort of like almost like the last Phoebe Bridgers record, where it's like really quiet, but there's so much happening instrumentally to make it work that way.
Yeah.
Like there's organs in the background. There's like three.
God, I
different
would
guitar
fucking-
lines doing different
I
melodies
would
and-
kill all three of you to hear Phoebe Bridgers cover "Heart Attack" in a lay-by. I'm sorry, but I would.
I'd let
Well,
you.
that's good because you die immediately after.
Yes, I would become the song. It's what
Yeah.
it's about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blimey.
Imagine how
Jesus.
unhinged a Phoebe Bridgers Steven Wilson collaboration would be.
Oh my.
I feel like-
Okay. See, if it was 5 years ago, it would be the album of the year. If it's right now, it might be the worst.
Yeah,
I
those
feel
two
like-
people are too unhinged at this point.
They would likely bring out the worst tendencies of either of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to address Creator Has Master Tape because I didn't
Yeah, go
get a
ahead.
chance to do that. It is quite handily my least favorite on this album, to such a degree that I have a playlist where I take it out and put "Drown with Me" in instead. Now, shut up, Tyler.
I said nothing.
You said so much with your face. You want that face off your face.
I was just thinking that.
I'm brooding.
I am your mother.
Now, I've grown to like Creator Has a Master Tape a lot more than I used to. But I get why it's there, and I understand why everybody, well, not everybody, I understand why you all like it where it is, but I feel like the album has settled into such a perfect atmospheric groove in the second half that I think Drown With Me as a replacement, especially, provides like that sort of energetic kick that Creator gives without completely switching up that atmosphere. Uh, I'm dying.
Whoa.
Tyler's killing me with his mind.
No, I just
Love scanners.
Where we differ is that I feel the record needs a kick in the groin exactly where it happens with that song, which is not to say that it wouldn't happen with Drown With Me. And it's not to say that I think Creator is a better song than Drown With Me. I don't. But it's this, I just think it's well placed, and it gives, especially the way that it kind of builds into, you know, a lot of what the songs are about and the theme of the record, and just adds this new kind of shade to this record's general kind of seediness. And I love that seedy aspect of this record. But yeah, look, I can also see where you're coming from.
See, for me, right, I feel like the Creator's master tape, it's less like it's a kick in the ass, right? But it's the start of like the perspective through which the album is meant to be viewed. The person who holds that perspective is starting to slowly unravel from this point onwards. And it ends with the track that it ends with. And that's like the culmination of that part. It's just, you know, you're viewing it through the seedy villainous perspective. And from this point onwards, it's like they're going, oh no. And it just gets more and more like that until the album ends.
Yeah, like Creator has
fair.
basically the same sort of energy to me as Strip the Soul, which I mean, they're both kind of similar topics. They both take that real darkness of the lyrical subject matter to kind of an extreme point, and they both IMO fucking knock my tits.
Oh, fucking. Remember how we joked about Steven rapping on Halo? Well, it kind of first shows here when he's just like, this is my home, this is my own, we don't like no strangers. I'm just kind of like, ooh, white boy's got bars.
That's great vocal delivery on that song.
It's so good.
Yeah.
But before this is why I specifically I take out Creator and put in Drown With Me, because I think Drown With Me accomplishes something very similar, especially if you place it at that point in the album. And that, like, I've tried, especially this past week, like, can I like sort of rearrange this album in a way that I think is better suited with Drown With Me while taking Creator out? And no, all I can do is take Creator out and put Drown With Me in, because they serve very similar purposes and vastly different approaches.
I believe also there's an alternate version of this record where the B-side track Chloroform is also included in the running stretch of the record, somewhere in the back half. I can't remember exactly where. I
can't either.
On the original vinyl of album, the track Chloroform was placed after Master Tape, which I'm glad it doesn't exist in that way now.
Yeah.
But Chloroform I could see as a song potentially replacing a song like Master Tape, potentially, if you really just couldn't get past that song. My thing with Drown With Me is I think it's a great song. I do think it was the right decision not to put it on the album. I can't really articulate why in a coherent way. But look, we've circled around this point. I think we both kind of all understand where each other stands on it. But yeah, Strip the Soul then. Well, this song is so fucked up. It's just
this machine still to please,
like it
strip the soul.
It's literally just like, I'm just a hole, sir. The song. Don't worry, edit that out.
I'm just posting that I'm just killing.
But yeah, no, I love the groove of this song. Like, here's a part on the record as well where both that seediness of the lyrics comes to the fore, but also just the seediness of the particular metallic groove approach of this record too. When the acoustic guitar, the sort of detuned acoustic guitar comes in, doing that, that specifically reminds me of moments on 9 Inch Nails' The Fragile. which
Yeah.
this song evokes quite clearly as well. I can imagine that sort of industrial metal even being a slight influence on some of the tones of the seedier moments of this record too, which I like to think is a genuine reference point, but well, obviously don't know. But that little coloring of the flavor of the darkness of this record that comes to the fore on this song was great. But also love the part where the guitar like really kind of goes crazy, and and you realize, oh wait, yeah, this is still a prog metal song, and it goes back into that. It's dope as shit. This is weirdly enough one of my most played songs on the album, because I just find myself a lot of the time in the mood for that groove. I just get it in my head, and
I mean, it's not weird just because it goes.
yeah, it goes
just-
like
Between the subject matter and the pseudo rapping, this is truly Steven Wilson's "Love the Way You Lie."
amazing. Yes, so true. Go off. You're spinning.
Morgan is going to drive over here and fucking kill me, and I'm gonna let him.
And
This is
I
my
mean,
house. This is my
I-
wife. This is why we call it window pane.
I am going to eat glass.
Play "Window Pane" by Opeth.
Yeah, that was it. I was just thinking of that.
Makes want to take
Eminem in the
acid
booth
bath
making
afterwards.
recovery, listening to fucking listening to that. That one song on recovery, except instead of the fucking Black Sabbath sample, it's the fucking Porcupine Tree
What?
instead.
Why in the fuck are we talking about Eminem right now?
We're just fucking around. Back to the song.
I feel like I'm losing my mind.
Never mind.
Right. Well,
All right.
obviously we should close this discussion out with the closing track. But before we get to that, is there anything else about other things? Anything else about this record that anyone wants to say before we kind of get to the big climax?
Yes, Point 3 is a masterpiece. Thank
Yes.
I
Goodbye.
thought you'd want to express that, so I didn't want to deny that from
I
you.
Morgan
just-
standing up for what's right.
I guess it's the most classically prog sounding fuck you. Sorry.
It's a good song. It's a good song, Morgan. I'm just trying to review the album.
It's like, I just came to have a very good time and I'm feeling very attacked right now.
Shout out to the strings in this song, which is I do absolutely love. I think the string lines that snake through this song are great. It gives it this real grandiose feel that I love. I absolutely can't take any points away from that. It's a really good song. So now it's time to come full circle with the closing track on this record, which is what we kind of
9/11.
Well, I want to say, and I know Jake already,
Bruh.
I know Jake already knows this, but Stephen did say specifically he didn't want to write a song about 9/11, but that 9/11 informed this song in a way that made
Yeah.
it inseparable from it. So it's not Stephen in the booth like, bro, I'm gonna drop the fucking hottest bars on the 9/11.
Gonna drop the hardest diss track against George W. Bush.
Collapse the Light into Earth is the moment on the record where Stephen cannot deny the impact that 9/11 had and the communal devastation of that on basically all music that was happening at the time, all creative expression. As much as he didn't want to be the dude who writes the topical song about the big thing that's happening, he, ultimately it couldn't avoid the emotions that outpoured from that feeding into this song, and it means it's an important integral, that emotional tenor, whether you want to interpret it in the lens of 9/11 or what, is a crucial part of why this song works the way it does, why it is such a show-stopping closer. I remember vividly the first time I ever heard this album, and when I got to this song, I was breathtaking. It was I was not expecting this album to end with this gorgeous
fucking
string
piano
laden
ballad.
piano ballad. I was not expecting that, and it moved me to tears. It's very difficult not to be when you listen to this song. It is the ultimate bow on this record, and it's speech taking.
Yes.
It
Yes.
may be this, like, it's a sad. It's definitely like an atmospheric, and it is kind of like it's got that air of tragedy to it. But it's also like it's the one song on the album that feels like the perseverance or stubbornness of making it out of this ordeal in the wake of this unnamed tragedy on the song might have a positive outcome. And at this point in the album, like at the end, it just works because you've just been mired in darkness for so long, and you've just been like, and emptiness, and exploring all of these different kinds of human emotional vacancy. And then you get to collapse the light into earth, and it's just like, it's the sun pouring through the clouds finally to allow you to see everything. It's the fucking, like, the first lyrics are, I won't shiver in the cold, I won't let the shadows take their toll, I won't cover my head in the dark, and I won't forget you when we part. Like, there's an acknowledgement of darkness and pain, but also the ability to move forward. And I feel like that's like a unifier there, and just sort of the repeating at the end of the collapse light
There,
into earth.
it's complicated for me. It's complicated for me because it is a song about about acceptance and about moving forward, but also it's a song about not pretending you're going to be okay either. Like, I particularly love those lines in the second verse. I won't heal given time. I won't try to change your mind. I won't feel better in the cold light of day, but I won't stop you if you want to stay. Like, that is
Oh, fuck.
yeah, that's beautifully real to me. And
I wouldn't stop you if you wanted to stay. That's like the
I
God.
mean, so I love this song. It's my favorite track on the record. Knocked me on my ass when I first heard it. You've all talked really beautifully about how beautiful it is. I find it really interesting in like the context in which it was made. Like on the last album, the Porcupine Tree, Light Bulb Sun was the album before this, yeah?
Yes,
Yeah,
2 years before.
Yes. There's a song on that is one of my favorite Porcupine Tree records about a cult I happen to be fascinated by outside of the context of this podcast, right?
Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth Before It Is Recycled. That one.
Indeed. Yes, it's my favorite thing.
Great song.
And he's obviously really fascinated by the ways in which sort of certain things like ideology can push you to horrible extremes, right? At the same time, this is an album in absentia. There is a darkness that is empty. There is a thing that Stephen Wilson is searching for inside a certain kind of person that he just cannot find. Like the way I read a quote from him where he put, like, he's fascinated on this record by an inability to feel empathy. And from all historical records, because I was 3 when 9/11 happened, from all historical documents I can gather, that was the mood afterwards. It's like, there is a thing we cannot explain, this horrible tragedy. So even though this is a very hopeful song, it slots right into the thematic ideas already present on the record.
It's like, and what I love about it is it's not a sentimental song. It's a song about feeling emotionally disconnected. It's not a song. It's a song about not. It's a song about feeling lonely and feeling isolated, and kind of being, almost like you don't really care whether you're alone or not. Like, I won't stop you if you want to stay, but like I'm in this particular state where I am in my head and I'm in myself and I'm broken and I'm fucked up and I'm unable to process what is happening around me, and that's just the way that I am. And it's very important for me that the song acknowledges that is what the song is about. It's not a song that creates some kind of happy ending, manufactures some kind of happy ending. It's more complicated than just things will be okay. It's a very complicated thing that you often have to accept in the wake of a crisis, and I don't get a lot of music that's really written about that, and that really understands that. Okay, I think we've done a pretty good job of summing up basically everything that makes this album moving, meaningful, and special in the Porcupine Tree discography. So let's move into our favorite tracks and ratings for Porcupine Tree's In Absentia. We'll go in reverse order this time, just for shits and giggles. My 3 favorite tracks on this record are Heart Attack and a Lay-By, Gravity Eyelids, and Trains. Least favorite track on this album, again.
Tyler trying to remember what a train is. You know, it's that big fucking thing, and it's on the rails, and it goes choo-choo. Mark Zuckerberg.
I give this album a 9.5 out of 10.
Right, my favorite tracks are Hard Second to Lay By, Collapse Light into Earth. The temptation to say the greatest a mistake. No, Trains.
Say it if you want. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, say your favorite songs. Go for it.
Do it.
I
You
double
saucy
dare you.
bitch.
I double dare you to name your three
Okay, one of
favorite
my favorite
tracks.
tracks on the record is Fredros and Master Tape. Fuck it. Right.
Yeah,
You may remember.
you saucy bitch.
Thank you. You may remember from our bumper double album Stephen Wilson episode. I gave both of those albums a 10. This train got interrupted by the future bites, but it continues today. This album gets a 10 out of 10 from me.
My three favorites are Heart Attack and a Lay-By, Prodigal, and Point 3. Least favorite, Creator has a master tape. And I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10.
August isn't here, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, because he does have this rated on Rate Your
Yeah.
Music, that he has it at an 8 on Rate Your Music. So he's absolutely in the bag, as it were. Bold
no,
of,
my breath held high.
it's bold of August to rate on an 8-point system, honestly. I never understood it.
Not conventional, but you know what? I gotta respect the specificity.
Yeah. Jake, what are your three favorite tracks and rating?
Just to represent the basic bitch Porcupine Tree fan that I am, I'm gonna say Trains. I'm gonna say Blackest Eyes, and then I'm gonna throw in Collapse the Light into Earth. I'm sorry, literally every other song. I love you, Lips of Ashes, love you, Heart Attack and a Lay-By. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Least favorite song, it's Creator has a master tape, but like fucking whatever, bro. 10, fuck you.
Love it.
Okay, well, let us know at home what you think of this album, what your favorite Porcupine Tree album is, what you think of our discussion as well. If we missed anything important, let us know in the comments below. Remember to go and check out our episode on Deadwing and Hand Cannot Erase if you have not already. In Absentia is my third favorite Stephen Wilson related album, and those two are my top two. So we had a really interesting discussion on those records. You should go and check out. And also check out Jake's Porcupine Tree tier list ranking video as well, if you haven't already too. That's a very good video that deserves your time. All right. So as always, rock over London, rock on Chicago. Levi's quality never goes out of style.
9/11.
Got horses in the back.
Anxiety attack.
Never mind.
You just described my day.
It's simply like the moment where even Steven can't deny the kind of emotional
Even
devastation.
Stevens.
It is the most
Stupid.
It
I'm
is
sorry.
It is the moment on the record where even Steven cannot deny how fuck you. Let me
Love Shia LaBeouf.
get out of my head. It is the moment. There is a moment. It is the moment on the record. I don't think anyone got my Interstellar reference there, but that's fine.
I couldn't speak.
Okay. Well, that about. Why am I so dark?
I mean,
Stephen Wilson to himself writing this album.
Robert Smith sitting in his bedroom, just like, what the fuck is it? Why? Why am I the way that I am?
I'm so fucked up.
Time to make 7 albums about it.